I'm gonna roll all over your butt. Roll all over your butt.
All right, I'm rolling.
All over your butt?
No.
Ka-cha! HooperCast. Hello, Dustin.
Hello, Hooper.
How are you?
I'm good.
Sweet.
How you be?
I'm good, man.
I didn't get to see you last week.
Oh, I know. Well, you sort of did.
Well, yeah, but like in a weird,
The listeners didn't know,
Yeah, they did.
even though I expressly explained to them.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were pretty explicit about what was happening here.
Yeah. Yes, last week, if you skipped the intro for some reason, you missed me explaining that last week's episode was what we refer to in the news as a look live. It appears, the news, there's a live shot. There's a person out somewhere, and they've remoted back to us, and then they talk for a little bit, and then they toss to their story, and then we play their story, right? But then sometimes if they need to come back to the station, but we still got to air the story later, sometimes you do a straight package, sometimes you do a look live. And that's basically where they pre-record their intro and outs, they slap it on at the beginning and the end of the timeline, and then you play it as if they're live. Look live. It looks like they're live. So there's a little lesson for you guys today. So that's basically what we did last week, and I personally think it turned out great, but,
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I also think that I'm,
Biased.
well, I was going to say, unfairly handsome, but...
I was going to say biased
Oh, well.
in your opinions towards this particular podcast.
I was going more toward my looks. I was trying to steer it back towards me.
You narcissistic son of a gun.
Oh, yes. All right, so, we did that last week, so that will happen anytime Dustin and I cannot meet up. Meet up every single week. Every single year.
They don't know that.
Anytime Dustin and I cannot get together and do this live-ish like now, we're going to throw together a prereq for you, but it'll be about 80% the same content. Just not things like this. Like, Dustin, what's your favorite color?
Blue.
Oh, cool. Hey, guess what would happen if this was a prereq? Hey, Dustin, what's your favorite color? Here, you do it to me, Dustin. You ask me the question. Like this is a prereq. Ask me, try to improv with someone who's not there. Go,
Hooper. What were your thoughts on the just the general stuff of movies?
Testing. Okay, here we go.
Wow, insightful, Hooper.
So
Thank you.
I thought that maybe the keyboard would be, I don't want to say black and white, but maybe white and black. Yeah, something like that.
Such a great opinion.
Yeah.
It basically feels like one of those kids shows where it's like, how do we get to Blue Mountain? Very good.
Meanwhile, my daughters are home like, "Bah!" Door's like, correct. Like, no, she wasn't. You weren't listening. Okay, anyway, sorry, everybody. We digress.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk some TV, or rather, I'm going to pontificate a little bit about TV. I imagine Dustin has some supporting thoughts on these two shows that he doesn't watch.
Yes.
I want to talk first about Game of Thrones. This past Sunday, both Game of Thrones and Silicon Valley aired their season finales on HBO. Game of Thrones was the season 5 finale, and Silicon Valley was the season 2 finale. So I want to talk about Game of Thrones real quick. I don't think I watched the show from the beginning, but I think I picked it up fairly earlier than I do most shows that I'm now into. So Game of Thrones is based on the book series. You all know what Game of Thrones is. I don't have to explain what it is.
What is it, Hooper?
Oh, well, go look it up. Anyway, can you imagine the cartoons doing that? Like, where? Why don't you Google it? We're moving on.
You stupid idiot.
Yeah, keep up, kids.
Were you 4?
The slow bus is that way. for some reason surrounding this season, there's been a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
Like there's been a lot of social media outcry against this season for some reason. And I've stewed about it for weeks before we even got to this topic today. So you're not going to get my full wrath about the topic. I feel like I've sort of spent on it. But essentially things like a rape happening, which I have now time and again described as, in my opinion, the most benign and implied off-screen, by the way, rape of a character in any storytelling I've ever had story told to me.
We are so good with words today.
That I've experienced. Like it was very benign. And then like senator or I can't remember which senator, who cares, came out and was like, that was in very poor taste. I'm done with Game of Thrones. And just people announcing every week that like they're gonna stop watching the show because they've crossed. I mean, and then the episode after that, one of the characters like burned his daughter at the stake, and they're like, "Oh, they've killed children. I'm out." And then it's like you have to remember the context of the show. Well, for me, my first reaction is, "All right, go." Like, God, just go. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss are not mourning the loss of your viewership. Their show is insanely popular. Your outrage about it gives them free press. And for me, it's just like, if you've hung in for 5 seasons, why don't you just, you can take a break, I guess. But I don't. When I'm this far into the show, unless I'm incredibly offended by the content, which never happens, I'm not going to put it down and never come back to it. It just seemed,
and you'd be more likely offended by like the artistic.
Yeah,
like,
I'd be offended by like the story
Not
falling completely apart,
right,
rather than the actions. By the way, the actions of evil characters
who are fictional.
Santa Claus didn't rape Rudolph.
Yeah,
I don't think, not that I know of.
Not that I'm aware of.
I hope not. That would. That'd be an eye opener.
That would ruin Christmas.
Yeah, that would certainly ruin Christmas.
Be a sad Christmas.
Yeah, for starters. This was an evil man raping a good character. And I've read blogs and stuff that talk about how it contributes to the moral decline of the culture, but that's a whole different argument. My short answer is no, it doesn't. Shut up. My thing mostly is this show is set in, it's fictional, but it's set in what you would compare to like, kind of medieval times. Like, a very terrible time to live for everybody. And the show, to me, is about suffering. And I mean, it's not principally about suffering, but it involves human suffering. And I don't think it's at all exploitative. Anytime someone gets their head cut off in combat, to me, it's not at all out of place. Amidst all the controversy, I really did think that this was their strongest season finale that they've had, and probably their strongest season. I mean, this is a show that has some cool stuff happening, but especially in the first couple of seasons, it's fairly slow because there's so much establishing, so much setup. I mean, imagine any TV show, Dustin, like where there's a whole lot of setup that you really have to kind of pay attention to, and then there's a little bit of payoff mid-season, and of course toward the end of the whole show. But this is a show where people are talking about fictional places, and there's a lot of names to remember. And, there's no cell phones. There's just stuff in it that it's a tall order to actually get people to hang on. And I would argue that they could have dipped to the low-hanging fruit and had a lot more needless action scenes in the show to grab people's viewership early. So I'm actually impressed that they didn't do that. Because people think, when people who don't watch Game of Thrones, if they idealize it without having seen it, they're thinking, oh, there's battles every episode. It's like, no, it's mostly just talking and traveling. Just a lot of talking and traveling. So it's actually impressive for a show to be this popular this far into their series without having to pander to the expectations of people who maybe want to see more sword fights. I just think that it was the best season of all of them because now there's finally payoff. There's characters who've never met before in the show who are finally in the same place and talking to each other. There are a lot of things that are set up that are paying off. There's the most interesting thing to me is I think they're at the point now in the show where they have caught up to where the books are. And George R.R. Martin hasn't written any books and hasn't added to the series in 20 years or something like that. And so everyone was wondering, what are they going to do when when they catch up to the books. And it's like, what do you think? Well, they're not gonna stop their show. What do you think they're gonna do? They're gonna write it. That's actually good to me because I'm in this. This is a similar. I'm going on a little long. This is similar to The Walking Dead, in my opinion, where I've also caught up finally with that season's 5th season finale. Right. And I believe The Walking Dead is fairly caught up to its source material, isn't it?
No, there's still quite a bit left.
Oh, well, there goes my whole argument. Well, I'll put it this way. When Walking Dead reaches this point, hopefully, well, I don't know how much longer that show ought to be on the air, but to me, it's like...
I think I read at one point they're planned up to like season 10 or so.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Okay, well, God. Well, that's a subject for
maybe that's just illusions of grandeur, though. I don't know.
Maybe that's just that's your fears in front of you.
Yes.
Well, I guess for Game of Thrones, it's good for them to be untethered because then they can do what you probably ought to be able to do anyway when you write a show, which is plan and write a show. You know, most people who write a show do it without source material. So it's kind of good for you if you've been relying on source material, maybe to flex that muscle so that your story can continue to have legs. Yeah. So it'll be interesting because then you'll get less people on the internet who are pissed off because something happened differently from the books. So when there's nothing to compare it to, all of this social media outcry can maybe diminish a little bit. I'm into the way it's going, and I'm more interested in the show now than I ever have been. And I don't think I'm a bad person for watching it or defending it against people who honestly I think are just looking for something to complain about. In socially. Now sure. I believe you agree with me about its place in the social context. I know that you don't watch the show. Mm-hmm. I believe you attempted to watch it, but it was not your thing creatively.
I watched the first season. Beyond that, I've watched nothing. Mm-hmm. My basic thesis going off of yours is I'm just tired of hearing about it. Like,
right.
I'm sure, like, at some point, everybody kind of feels this way about shows that they don't watch. But for me, Game of Thrones still has so much media attention and social media attention that I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And I wish people would just calm down because I couldn't see what was so great about this show. Mm-hmm. I can't understand it. To me, it's a lesser version of a lot of better things. Mm-hmm. And it trades on cheap kills, cheap thrills, and cheap, like, ways of, like, manipulating emotions. And for that reason, that's why I think that it's so popular on social media, because people can instantly tweet about something that they're emotionally feeling every single episode. And the fact that that happens every single episode, I think, is lazy storytelling. And storytelling, of course, this is coming from me who has not seen it, who does not know what's going on. Mm-hmm. But I can't imagine being invested in a show where I'm being emotionally manipulated in every single episode. And especially to a degree that people are, it seems after every episode somebody says, I'm done. I can't. If that's the show, if that's the impact of the show, then I think that the show is trading on something and in essence sort of overcompensating for its lack of actual development or its lack of actual something. And again, I don't know what that something is because I haven't seen it. But I can't imagine a show or a story where it's constantly something like that happening.
I think most of the reaction to these events is extremely overblown. Like, I really think that when people freak out about it, it's like I think you're a little too invested in what happens. Like, there were videos all over the internet yesterday or the past few days of, angry reactions, like people who filmed themselves watching the end of the episode, and it was all mashed up. And I just thought, this is ridiculous.
There's so much of that it makes me not want to watch the show because I feel like all it is let's do a thing to make a person feel a thing. And I know that's kind of what story is.
I really feel like they're not doing that. So that's why I hate people reacting that way so much. It's because I don't feel at all like the show does that. I feel like the show just tells the story. But I feel like people are assigning this giant importance to it and this big emotional. I almost feel like people are reacting just to get attention. And I hate it because clearly, like, it makes people like you, who I don't know if you would enjoy the show if you were to watch all the way through, but I feel like you would enjoy it more than you think you would. You know, whether it's ultimately worth your time is, you know, that's only you could know that. But I hate that people are reacting so strongly to it in a way I feel like is disproportionate to what's actually going on.
Well, let me give you an example. And this is just from the first season. Mm-hmm. I felt like, first of all, I felt very little about that show. So whether I would enjoy it or not, I have no question that I probably wouldn't, because I watched a whole season with little to no attachment. Mm-hmm. You know, the death of Sean Bean's character, I felt like was a huge emotional, like, jab at the audience. It's stuff like that. Like, here's what we're going to make you think a thing, and then we're going to pull the rug out from under you. And that's, to me, like, maybe you can get away with that once. To me, it just felt like manipulation. It did not feel like, let me tell you a story. It felt like, how can we create a thing that will make people talk at the water cooler? And I know it's based on a book series, so I'm sure that happened in the books. But there again, story to me is an honest, like, I have a burning story in me about people, and I have to get that out. Whether you attach to it or not is not my real concern. My concern is whether I can tell this story that's burning within me. But to me, with Game of Thrones, it seems the opposite. It seems it's not so much about the burning story in me. It's about how far can I go to piss off or manipulate the people that are enjoying it. And so for that reason, I don't like it. Also, I felt like there are certain, and I know you have to kind of take these things with whatever, but I felt like there was just a negative, complete lack of hope or positivity in the show. I felt, and I know, the dark ages, but still, there was no beam of light at all in the show. The characters were all morally gray. No sense of, where am I supposed to be? Like, when I come in and when I attach, who is my character? Who is the one that I'm supposed to be? Because I don't see myself in any of these people. I didn't see anything real in it. I felt like it was all complete fantasy. There's no way that any of these characters could be what they are. I didn't see maybe flashes of realism, but no real grasp of the human condition or the state of the human psyche even. It was just whatever they were here. Okay. Pot calling the kettle black. When I write, I always feel like my characters are all just me. And that's my weakness. And that's what has kept me from really writing more, is because I just feel like I've got to get a grasp on writing people that aren't me. But I feel like that's the problem with Game of Thrones, is all the characters are the same. They're all cynical. They all are, selfish. They all, I mean, I know it's about all of them wanting the throne, but whatever. It's all just so, they're all the same. None of them have a moral compass. None of them care. It's all weird to me. And at least judging from the first season, to me, that didn't make any sense. And, I guess the fact that it's become this critical darling and that everyone is all gaga about it and I couldn't get attached to it made me hate it. And then on top of that, having all of these people being like, it's such a great thing for, feminism and all of these great causes because we've got strong female characters and all this stuff, and yet it still objectifies its women in the way that it does. And all of these things seem so like manipulative of the audience. That it's like, hey, we're going to give you what you want, but there's also people who don't want that, so let me give them that too. There are people who come to the show just to see boobs, and there are people who come to the show who want equality for women, so let's give them both, but you can't give them both because they're contradictory statements. So anyway, to me, the show just didn't know what it was, and I couldn't attach to it, and it just seemed like everything turned me off.
Well, I don't know about the trying to please everybody part of the show. I never got that feeling from it. I know what you mean about the trying to latch onto a character, because I guess I'll say this to anyone who isn't watching the show. Like, I think it's an enjoyable show, but you have to realize going in, what that season 1 finale sort of taught me as a viewer was, don't get attached to any one of these characters. And for me, it was a shock to my system for a while, because I thought, well then, but I was only paying attention to him for the whole season. And that's when I sort of shifted the way I approached the show, and I started really trying to pay attention to everyone's story. And I guess it enveloped me more into the show and drew me into more of the characters and sort of taught me to think. I guess it made it a little bit more tense, in a good way for me at least, to think that any of them, no matter what they're trying to do, could be snuffed out. It enhanced it for me because at least it was a little different. But for you, Dustin, then I guess I would say you maybe won't want to watch 4 more seasons of that. You know,
I don't.
So
Yeah.
I understand. I understand.
You know, and I don't have a problem with ensemble shows, but you know, I do like to at least have a clear voice of who I'm supposed to be rooting for. I can't root for everybody, and the show can't tell me you should make up your own mind who to root for. You know, give me a protagonist. And if the answer is root for everybody, then you got to give me reasons to root for everybody.
The biggest appeal of the show to me is it's basically like watching a gigantic, very long game of chess where the pawns, the knights, all those people will actually die. It's just like other shows in a way it's just a giant power play between clearly defined characters, who most of whom are selfish, some of whom you want good things for. Like there are characters who don't belong in this world but must still live in it. So some people you want to see succeed, and some of them just suffer. Anyway, yeah, on HBO Go. If you're looking to catch up, I guess I'll add real quick. Silicon Valley season 2 just wrapped up. This is a show by Mike Judge from Office Space. I don't imagine John would like this show because it heavily features T.J. Miller. But not much to say about Silicon Valley. It's a good, solid show. It takes place in, obviously like the tech world. It's basically centered around a group of guys who develop this file compression software that's revolutionary. A bigger company trying to take possession of their intellectual property through a lawsuit, and it's basically them navigating the business world. Like, what's interesting about this show is it's a show about essentially how business works in a way, but it features colorful. But it's believable that the characters would be this colorful because they're kind of like why Steve Jobs is such an interesting guy, because he's ultra creative, but he's business oriented too. So it's believable that these kinds of wacky characters, I say wacky, they're not cartoonish, would be in such a position as they are because these types of people. This is how things like this get started. They're smart. They know how to code. They have an idea, and then all of a sudden they find people who are offering to stake their company, represent them legally, or who want to work for them, and they run a company out of a house, sort of a thing. So it's interesting in the way of watching a startup kind of grow. Except it's a comedy, and so there's humor, but there's actual obstacles and roadblocks they have to go through, and all the performances are really spot on. I mean, you got Martin Starr, what's his face, Kumail Nanjiani, T.J. Miller, that guy who played Gabe on The Office. I can't remember his freaking name.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But that guy, it's like Josh something, I think.
Yeah,
but he's funny, and the main character Thomas Middleditch, who I didn't know anything about, and I was sort of annoyed by his character, like for a while because he's such a puss. Mm-hmm. Like he's like, I guess Pied Piper can be the. I hate this guy, but then I guess it took me seeing an interview with him where he's completely the opposite of that guy.
Dude,
of
he's
the Richard
so
character. He's hilarious. Yeah. And I guess the point of the show is watching him become more assertive and more confident. As if he's going to be the CEO of this company, he can't be this buttoned up, bottled up kind of nervous, neurotic dude. So I think it's a fun show to watch. It's half hour. It's comedy. It's good stuff. Check out Silicon Valley if you're looking for something to latch onto. It's very solid show, and I'm excited to see more of it.
Nice. We're
going to talk about Jurassic World. It has over the weekend become the highest grossing domestic opening weekend of all time.
Yep.
Wow.
$500 million.
$500 million.
That's impressive.
That's very impressive.
If you had asked me at the beginning of this year, I would never in a million years have thought that.
John and Dustin both saw the film. I did not. So we're going to play John's review of it real quick, and then Dustin's got some stuff to say as well. And maybe I will, but I didn't see it, so I don't imagine I have a lot to say. Anyway, here's John with his thoughts on Jurassic World.
All right. So here are my quick thoughts on Jurassic World. The first Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies of all time, and so I think I obviously had high expectations for this film, this follow-up film to that first movie. The film is really a sequel to the first film and largely kind of ignores the second and third film, which kind of received mixed reactions from a lot of people. I think that this was a smart way to go, obviously, because the first film is the best loved of the whole franchise. But I think a lot of people went into this hoping it would be as good as the first film. I never had that impression. I knew that there was no way it could be as good as the first film because the scope of film has changed so much, and the way films are made and stories are told has changed radically in the decades since the first film has been released. So I knew it would be different, and it is quite different. It's more of an action adventure type film, while the first one was kind of a more serious science fiction film with some slight action and horror elements to it. But this was kind of a straight action movie with some science thrown in. That being said, I think they did a really good job of breathing new life into the brand and the franchise while still maintaining a lot of the old vibes from the first film. So you're going to have a lot of callbacks to the first film, a lot of Easter eggs and references to the first film. They kind of bring up a lot of emotions within you and kind of help it to relate to the first film. The Easter eggs aren't beating you over the head, though. They're pretty subtle, and you have to know the first film pretty well to get a lot of them, although casual viewers will notice a lot of them as well. But I think it went in a more action-oriented way, including heavy use of CG, which was another thing that some people have talked about negatively, the film's over-reliance on CG. Because the first film was kind of a watershed film in terms of visual effects, both with audio animatronic figures and early CG characters, it's been kind of held up to this untouchable. It's a very respected film in that regard for special effects, and so a lot of people were disappointed that they went with CG in this film. I thought the CG was good. It didn't blow me away, but it was never distracting or bad. I thought there was one or two scenes an animatronic figure was used, but for the most part, I'd say 85% of the visual effects are done with CG in this film. But I didn't mind it. I think they were done well, and they didn't take away from the film at all for me. The big strength of the film for me was just the fact that it brought that world back to life. I think we'd all been waiting to see how this film turned out because we care so much about the world. And this was really the first film to show what that park would be like if it actually opened to guests, which is something we'd all been wondering since the first film, which got close, but the park never actually had guests in it. So this is kind of exploring what would happen if a catastrophe were to occur within the park. It also deals with scientists creating a new breed of dinosaur by picking and pulling different parts and pieces from various other dinosaurs within the park, basically kind of creating this monster dinosaur. I think that's an interesting concept to explore, if not hugely realistic. But I think you have to kind of look at this film as not as realistic as the first one and just kind of go with it. So once you put that behind you, I think you can look at the Indominus Rex as a very interesting aspect of the film. And another high point for the film for me were the two leads, Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard. Chris Pratt plays a kind of dinosaur trainer and kind of assumes kind of a mixture of roles from the first film, Alan Grant and Dr. Ian Malcolm. He's kind of a mixture of both those characters. So he's a little bit of a quiet character. He's a little rugged, but he also has a lot of apprehensions about the park and how all these crossbred dinosaurs and all that can fit into the entire world. Chris Pratt was good. I don't think that any of the characters in this film were quite as memorable or even close to as memorable as the ones in the first film, but that was never, like I said, that had never even entered my mind that they would be that. So It didn't bother me. They were actually better developed than I thought they would be. Bryce Dallas Howard does a good job kind of playing a career-driven, career-obsessed woman who is in charge of park operations. And she's kind of put in the middle of this whole incident while looking for her 2 nephews that are there visiting the park. So she joins up with Chris Pratt's character to search through the park and find them after they go missing. So it's kind of similar to the first film in that way. 2 groups of people trying to reconnect with one another like the first film. And overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Don't go into it expecting some deep message like the first film had. This is not the first film. This is kind of Jurassic Park for an entirely new audience and an entirely new generation while still maintaining a lot of the DNA. Oh, they made the first film great. So if that sounds appealing to you, go check it out, because I would recommend it. Thanks.
There are dinosaurs in the HooperCast studio.
Oh, in the studios. Oh, I gotta go. No. No. Oh God. Oh. All right.
When you gotta go, you gotta go.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, those are John's. That's John. So, Dustin, do you have anything to add to that?
Basically, I agree with him. I mean, it's a fun movie, and it's something that I definitely enjoyed. I didn't realize how big of a Jurassic Park kind of nerd I am until I saw the movie and the score came on like in the theater, and I was like, oh my gosh, like waves of nostalgia over here. I'll set this up too. I'm one of those people, I don't really like The Lost World very much, but I don't mind so much Jurassic Park 3. I mean, it's goofy. It's got the talking raptor, and it has Alan, or whatever, talking at the end.
Alan.
Like, yeah, as Dr. Grant talking at the end with the Velociraptor, like larynx or whatever it was, I don't know. And he talks to raptors, which was super goofy. But I don't mind it so much. I think it's okay. I mean, whatever. And then Jurassic World comes around, and like John said, it's a more of a direct sequel to the first film because it's set on that same island, whereas The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 are both set on the sister island. We're back in the original island with the original dinosaurs, and yeah, I mean, look, it's a fun movie, and I've heard it criticized for a lot of things, and John and I were talking earlier about just the various things that it's criticized for, and how the internet bloggers kind of go crazy and just want something to pick on. The thing that we're seeing the most criticism about the movie for is that Bryce Dallas Howard ran in heels, and that it's a step back for feminism. And I'm like,
for God's sake,
like,
I'm so tired of hearing that.
Me too. I'm like, first of all, movies are expressions of self, and if the writer doesn't want to express feminism, you cannot fault him for not having your vision.
Do you know what's a step back for feminism?
Film criticism.
Always bringing up feminism.
Yeah, this
in
is
every
true.
context possible.
Well, feminism, especially in movie criticism, doesn't take into account that women are different. That every woman is different from every other woman. So who's to say that having a woman who runs in heels or who, falls in love with Chris Pratt or whatever, who's to say that that's not realistic? Or who's to say that that's a step back for feminism? Women are different from women. You look at Firefly, Zoe is not River, is not Kaylee, is not Inara. Women are just different. Characters should be different. You can't have every woman be like a stone-faced, I don't need no man, tough as nails character. That works for Ellen Ripley, and it works for the Terminator. But
it's the same as if you wrote every man the same.
Exactly.
Too. Like, we don't want to see any characters who really remind us of other characters. And just because she's a woman doesn't mean she has to be ultra Like, I feel like they're crying wolf at this point. So every time they're like, "Hey, the feminism," I'm like, "Hey, I don't hear you. You say this every day. I'm not going to. There's a wolf in the woods. No, I don't believe you."
I don't believe you anymore. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same as the people who got all over Joss Whedon for having Black Widow in a relationship and talk about, being sad for being, infertile and whatnot. And I'm like, who? Like that's not a step back for feminism. That is a character who is different from other female characters. It shows that women are individuals. I don't understand.
Yeah. Fuck.
Anyway, okay, enough about that. Anyway, there's a lot being said about this film that is not valid film criticism. So let's talk about this. John made a good point that blockbusters in the decades since the original Jurassic Park have changed. Like it or not, blockbusters have changed. So when I went into this, I was not expecting a 1990s blockbuster because that's not what I was going to get. What I was expecting was an action movie that had dinosaurs in it, had Chris Pratt in it, and I got those things. So I wasn't disappointed. And I've heard people say it's not tense, it doesn't have any frightening parts, but
oh my God, did they enjoy the film or not?
Exactly. Like, the film has a few missteps. I'm not going to say it doesn't. There are things that they bring up and then drop. There are things that you would think relate to characters that don't really matter so much. And that's about as vague as I can be, without spoiling specific things. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll give you one example. So the first time that we see these two children characters, one of them, a 16-year-old, is saying goodbye to his girlfriend. And then next time you see him, he's like, at the airport or something, and he's like looking at pictures of her on his phone.
Hey, that girlfriend, she's not defined by being his boyfriend, She's. Do you remember her name, Dustin? Or is she just his? Is that all she is to you? Is his girlfriend?
They literally never said her name. But anyway, he's like looking at pictures of her on his phone. So you think maybe the through line for him is going to be related to his girlfriend. Then all of a sudden it's gone. Like, it never comes back again. So maybe, what they thought they were doing was giving character and saying, here's a 16-year-old boy. He's your typical 16-year-old boy. He has this girlfriend who's he's obsessed with, but he's not really, all that committed to her or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
They thought they were saying things, but what it felt like was they were setting up a story rather than just a character point. Does that make sense? A character trait?
Yeah.
So there are problems in that regard. And there are things that I certainly would have done differently. But, there again, it's hard to fault a film or criticize a film for something that they didn't do.
Well, I'm going to continue to say what I would continue to point. I have not seen the film, but I'm starting. I've demonstrated. This is the third time now I'm going to mention this with stuff we've talked about recently. So I'll keep the point itself short. I'm just noticing that anytime we're rebooting or bringing something back into the public eye, like Daredevil or this, I think what they're trying to do, reestablishing these franchises, Mad Max was the other thing, is I think what they're trying to do is just bring it up and rebrand it and not try to juggle too much in the first film. I don't think they thought they'd break, the record they broke, but I think they just hoped, look, let's just make a solid movie, and then if it does well, we can really try to make a great movie with the next one. That's arguably smarter than going balls out on the first one and then having nothing to follow up with.
It's true, and to be fair, I mean, in hindsight, what is it that you really want out of a Jurassic Park sequel? Like,
I want to see some dinosaur chases.
Yeah, if I had asked anybody, 2 weeks ago, what do you want out of this? They're going to say, I want to see some cool dinosaur action. No one's going to say, I hope the characters are relatable and believable, and I hope that they have a solid arc that gets, tied up emotionally at the end.
Do you know what's the ultimate relatability? Danger.
Yeah, exactly. And this film has that. The thing about Jurassic Park, it's one of my favorite movies of all time, but when you go back and you watch it, the characters are not nearly as fleshed out as you remember them being.
Right. You think they're starry-eyed about them.
Well, this is true, but the characters, essentially are hinted throughout the film. Like, you get to know the characters through their actions and the way they respond to the danger. There's not like a big buildup of 30 minutes of Dr. Grant so you get to know him before he gets on the island. You meet him at the at the dig site, and he talks to a kid in a frightening way. And then, so you know two things about him. One, he loves his work. He's passionate about it. And two, he doesn't like kids. Those are the two things you learn about him. And then the next time you see him, he is on the island. You see what I'm saying? He's on the way to the island. So you learn more about him as the story goes along, about the way that he responds to situations. And it's the same way here. There's not a huge setup for who Chris Pratt is, but you learn who he is through his, reaction
actions
to the things. Now, here's the thing. Do we know what Chris Pratt does when he's not on the island? Not really. Do we know what his passions are, if he ever, was married, or, if his parents are still alive? No. But we didn't know those things about Alan Grant either. So, to me, how much character do you want in this film? Because ultimately, it is not about the people. It is about the way they react to the environment they're in, which is a super dangerous, you're about to die all the time environment. Mm-hmm. And I believe that we do learn enough about these characters to root for them. Now, it is not enough to then make the Chris Pratt spinoff without the dinosaurs, but I don't want that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're not going to win an Oscar because it's not a role that's going to change lives or make you think, but it's a role that gives you enough about that character to root for him. And that's all you need in a movie like this.
Yeah, people overblow I hate we talk about this all the time, but I hate that people just are in this big thing where somewhere they've been taught that they've sold out if they even enjoy blockbuster movies, or
exactly.
if they cannot defend something intellectually, then it shall not be enjoyed.
Right.
And
exactly.
I hate that with any that's not criticism. That's actually that's more exclusive than having no female characters or something to me. It's like you're dismissing the film because it's made for a large audience. Sure.
Or in the case of this film, it is made in a way that kids can also enjoy it. Yeah, whereas the first Jurassic Park is probably more of an adult movie than this is. But who cared?
Let's compare The Great Train Robbery with Jurassic Park.
Okay.
Which one would you rather watch, Dustin?
I would rather watch Jurassic Park.
Oh, boy.
Oh,
I'm gonna take your degree right now and just rip it up for saying that.
Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, it's boring. It may be cinema history, but it's the fact is it's boring. It is. I'm sorry.
Sure.
So all I'm saying is that's boring. That's true. I'm not dismissing its value as a piece of cinema history or bringing or pushing the medium forward as it did. So conversely, if you're a movie snob, you cannot dismiss Jurassic World because it's made for a broad audience, and you can probably dismiss it in terms of its creative content. You know what I'm trying to say? You could dismiss it.
I do.
But to a certain extent, it's but think about why it was made and what it was made to do. And your answer might be, consumerism and blah blah blah. But for God's sake, can't we just make an action adventure movie anymore?
Right. And here's the other thing I'll say about the characters in the film is that you have to we're going to compare them to the original Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park, what was Dr. Grant's goal through the film? It was to live. It was to survive. It was to make it another minute, in this, tropical craziness. But what made it feel deeper was that he overcame his hatred of children. This was not a goal that he had. He didn't enter the movie saying, I need to be better with kids. It was a byproduct of spending time with them. So his goal was still survival. Yeah. But it feels deeper because a secondary thing happened. I hate to spoil this for you, Hooper.
It's
But in Jurassic World, what is Chris Pratt's goal? Survival. Mm-hmm. What happens as a byproduct of the survival? He gets to kiss Bryce Dallas Howard. But the feminists would have you say this is not a good thing because it's like, whatever.
Because a man is happy?
I don't know. But here's the other thing. She's work obsessed, and over the course of it begins to feel some feelings for Chris Pratt. They may be based on the fact that, they're in this together, or they may not be. Who knows? The point is, there is a byproduct of Chris Pratt's goal in the film, which is survival, just like Alan Grant's. It may not seem as deep, but it's every bit as deep, because why did Dr. Grant get over his hatred of children? Because he spent time with them. Why did Chris Pratt sort of maybe fall in love with Bryce Dallas Howard? Because he spent time with her. That was the thing. It's exactly the same thing. So why is this character so much more thin than Alan Grant? He's not really. It's just the fact that people like to hate on him because he's the action hero, and Alan Grant was a reluctant hero. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. So it's a personal preference thing. It's not a matter of whether one character was more thin or less thin than the other. They were the same. Someone saying the characters are too thin, they don't have an argument.
It's just not something I think about when I watch these movies. Like,
Right.
I'm not tricked into not thinking about it. It's just that's not why I'm here. Like,
No.
I'd rather the underlying story be relatively simple, because there's nothing worse in certain movies where, like, where they put too much emphasis on the part you don't care about. Like,
Look at
the problems with
Godzilla.
Okay, well, or Godzilla. Well, here, you do Godzilla, but I'm going to do Transformers.
Okay, go do Transformers.
Okay, well, in Transformers, they spend way too much time with the human characters. I don't really care about them. I don't care too much about the setup of Sam going to college and blah blah blah. Like, you got to have some of that because you have to latch onto somebody, perhaps. Sure. To me, like, all I wanted to do was watch the robots fight in those movies, and so when they made the sequels that had more robots fighting, I was into that, like that. Who cares if they're fleshed out completely? That's not why I'm here.
To me, the Jurassic World is the opposite of Godzilla, because Godzilla was afraid to give us what we wanted, which was Godzilla.
Yeah.
And instead worked too hard at trying to flesh out characters that we never cared about in the first place.
Yes.
Jurassic World is the opposite. It gives us exactly what we want, which is dinosaurs. And dinosaurs fighting, and dinosaurs being scary, and dinosaurs being legit and awesome. And cuts down the time that we spend with the characters. Maybe. It didn't feel like, we never spend any time with the characters. We do. So, right. But it cuts down on, like, the boring, like, stuff that you're going to say, stop, So,
right.
I don't know. I think this is the answer to Godzilla. This is better than that Godzilla film was. It was fun to watch. It gave us what we wanted. It didn't spend time giving us what we don't want. And like you said, like John said, it sets up and reintroduces this world for future films and for the new generation in a way that I think they needed it set up to be. An 8-year-old kid today is different from an 8-year-old kid in the 90s, and what they desire out of a blockbuster is different because what they're getting from blockbusters is different. So, I mean, I don't know about you, Hooper, but when I was 8 years old, I don't think my mom wanted me to see Jurassic Park. I remember the first time I saw Jurassic Park, though. I was at my grandfather's house, and he put it on TV. It was on VHS that he had bought. And I don't remember my mom being very happy that I was watching Jurassic Park because I was too young. And I don't know how old I was, probably like 5 or 6 or so. It was more of an adult movie, whereas over the years, because maybe kids have become desensitized or whatever it may be, Jurassic Park is viewed more childish these days, and kids love the dinosaurs and love all that stuff. Maybe it's because Jurassic Park 3 was more childish. I don't know. This takes that a step further and makes this franchise for kids and adults alike. And I don't have a problem with that because it didn't sacrifice, to me, the tension. It didn't sacrifice the dinosaur thrills. It didn't sacrifice what I came to see. So I don't mind. I know what I've said is a lot of positive stuff. There are some negative things too, but by and large, the movie's fun, and if you are in the mood to see dinosaurs fight, and if you like Jurassic Park, you're going to like this movie. I really, well, maybe not. I think I've been proven wrong just by saying that, but I think that Jurassic Park and Jurassic World I compared them earlier to Alien and Aliens. If Alien is the more like horror-driven film, Aliens being the more action-driven film, that's the same way here. But I like both approaches, and I think both approaches are valid with the subject matter. So, who cares? Whatever.
Yeah.
Long story short, if you like Jurassic Park, at least give this a shot. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. But if you like action movies, give it a shot. If you're super into dinosaurs, give it a shot. You don't have anything to lose, but don't go into it expecting it to be Jurassic Park, because it isn't. It's its own thing, and it should be its own thing.
You should go into every film with a clean slate.
Exactly. You should at least try to go in without any presuppositions, and that I believe that for everything.
It's almost like people go into movies ready to take mental notes about its structure. And it's like, look, I'm not saying you should turn off your brain and just be like a sheep, at the theater. But I mean, are you going to the movie to rip it apart, or are you going there to enjoy it? Because if you're there to enjoy it, then just relax and watch the movie. I'm there for an escape. I don't see dinosaurs in my everyday life, so I expect to see some. I don't want to see a bunch of human drama that I encounter every day when I go to the theater. I want to see some dinosaurs. I want to see, I want to see big robots fight. That's just me. But
I think you'll like this movie, Connor.
Yeah,
and I think that most people will, and I think $500 million proves my point.
Yeah,
there are some problems if you look at it from a critical, artistic point of view. There are some problems, but they're so small that it doesn't harm the overall good that the movie does. Right. And that good being fun, and that good being escapism, and that fun being just general awesome dinosaur stuff.
Yeah, stop overthinking it.
Yeah. Would it be great if this had a philosophical, social message like the first one that said, you were so busy thinking about if you could, you didn't wonder if you should? Yeah, I mean, I guess so. But in a way, it kind of does, even though it doesn't verbalize it. Because they reopened the park. That's the embodiment of this. You didn't think about if you should. So they don't verbalize it this time around, but whatever, who cares? I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Basically, the point is Jurassic World is a good film, and while it's not going to win any Oscars, it's going to be a good jumping on point for new people, for kids, for this new generation, and a re-jumping on point for people who have forgotten the franchise after maybe 2 films that weren't so great. And I will put it here. I like Jurassic Park the best, Jurassic World the second best, Jurassic Park 3, and The Lost World at the bottom. Just because The Lost World has a girl gymnastic kicking velociraptors. Oh, yeah. There's none of that here. No gymnastics in this film. So, although a woman does run in her heels, so if you have a problem with women wearing heels because women shouldn't be wearing heels or something, I don't know.
Okay, well, that's going to be it for this week. We would talk about what's in theaters next week, but the only thing I see opening is Inside Out, which is the new Pixar one, right?
Yes, I will be seeing that.
Okay. I don't know anything about it, but I'm sure we will talk about it fairly soon.
I've never seen a trailer for it, but it says Pixar, so I'll see it.
Okay, good. That's probably... I'm interested then with a clean slate. I won't watch any trailers because I'd like you to describe it to me fresh when you see it.
Yeah. So, very quickly for me, it was just a matter of it's a Pixar movie. I'd like to see it, but it's not like an Avengers where I want to just let me get a glimpse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I don't have to see a trailer.
You trust their batting average.
Sure. So.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Well, thanks for listening, you guys. Subscribe to us on iTunes or on YouTube, HooperCast Pod. Or on Blogger, hoopercastpod.blogspot.com, or Tumblr, hoopercastpod.tumblr.com. You can donate on both of those 2 websites, or the Facebook page, facebook.com/hoopercast, or on Podbean, hoopercastpod.podbean.com, and follow us on Twitter @hoopercast. Don't follow us in real life because I will call the police, and you will be searched and detained. Until next time, I'm Connor, that's Dustin. This was and we have been the HooperCast.
We have been the HooperCast.
Don't they teach like the Apple employees to say that or something like I've been Kevin or something?
It's something like that.
Or was that just from the Winter Soldier I'm thinking of?
I know that was from Winter Soldier, but I don't know. I've only been to an Apple store once.
Sorry, Apple. Yeah, we don't have one in the city I live in.
Yeah, the closest one to me is like an hour away. So
yeah, mine's in New Orleans.
I'm not going up there. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Goodbye.
All right. Bye.
Woo.